Not quite sure of the YouTube etiquette when it comes to, this intro. Like, do you have to say, "Hi, everybody on YouTube. This is Wingnut"? It just seems counterproductive to me. But then again, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Well, I guess what we're going to talk about today is another one of my hobbies, which you may or may not find interesting. That's your business. Is, gardening. I'm a big fan of gardens. I'm not talking about like a bunch of flowers and pretty stuff. I'm talking edible food. Growing up, my dad had a garden. My grandfather had a garden. There was a couple times where, it was not. I guess the term you could use was, it was not uncommon to see people where I grew up growing their own food. Growing their own food, raising their own food, and that's something that I'm fairly passionate about because it's a good thing to know how to do. And then the other flip side of that is, as one person put it, and I believe the man's name was Ron Finley, growing your own food is like printing your own money. And I'll put a link down to him below. He's a guy out of Los Angeles that saw that his neighborhood was suffering, and that that there was nothing really healthy options. So he started reaching out to folks, reaching out to the community, and teaching people how to grow food, how to grow gardens in small plots, in between the walkways of their houses and whatnot. So there's an interest, there's a want. People want to eat good. People want to eat healthy. They want to save money if they can. And one of the best ways to do that is to grow your own garden. And like I said, I'm a huge fan of growing my own garden. My wife and I grew, just a ridiculous amount of foods on a 20-foot by 5-foot plot in a bunch of containers in base housing over a year ago. And it for a couple of years. And it saved us money. And plus, it's nice to be able to just go outside. If you want a fresh tomato, and you pick one. I ain't gotta go to a store and buy it and spend $5 a pound for a tomato. To me, that's ridiculous. Food's expensive. It's expensive to eat. It's expensive to eat well, today. Whereas because you're trading hard-earned cash for a product, and a lot of people, they eat cheap. It's not healthy shit. It's not good for you. And then there's tons of stuff out there. There's tons of movies, and there's tons of things that you can see in documentaries and anecdotal whatever. If you want to do the research, do the research. I'm telling you right now, it is absolutely and utterly satisfying to grow your own food. You know where it's been. You know where it came from. You know who worked on it. You know that some kid in Chile or El Salvador isn't getting paid pennies an hour to grow it. And to truly be sustainable enough to grow enough food for yourself and your family, you do need land. But there are options that you can come up with yourself. And like I said, this stuff's out there if you just look a little bit about container gardening or urban gardening or guerrilla gardening. Then there's CSAs, there's places where you can go and rent space to grow food, and it's usually just vacant city lots that someone's cleaned up and turned into a garden. Those are options for you if you want to do it. I just can't see not doing it nowadays. There's just so much crap out there that you're ingesting. Maybe a bit of wrong gear for that one. But there's so much garbage out there that we're putting into our systems, and I don't want to do that. I want to try to have best as possible. But now I've got a house with a yard, and I have a place where I can put some raised beds in. I'm going to do so. And but gardening comes back around to community. It's a wonderful thing to garden. It's an absolutely fabulous thing, to just try it. Even if you can only get a small container and grow one tomato plant, do it. I've done it. I had the most pitiless looking tomato plant ever, out of a container on a balcony in Norfolk, Virginia. Ooh, and you can't beat the fact that you know everything about that plant. everything about the fruit that comes from it. You know, the fruits of your labor kind of thing, where, you know, the beer tastes better when you make it yourself. You know, the wine tastes, you know, fuller. Motherfucker. You know, all that kind of thing, you know, is the pride you take in it. And then the flip side of that too is having a garden is a good way to build community. You know, get involved in a community garden. Those kind of things, man, that they're uplifting. They bring you up. That's the kind of stuff that makes you want to, you know, I don't know, for me, I want to be a better person every time I go into my garden and I work on it, or I do something for my garden. I do something that's just a little bit better for me. And I'm not saying I'm a saint. I'm not saying that making a garden is going to wash away your sins or anything close to that kind of shit. What I'm simply saying is it feels good that you're doing something for yourself that is completely and utterly independent of other people. But on the flip side is, you come into work and you start talking about gardening and whatnot. Now, I'm not what you consider an atypical gardener. But I grew up on a farm. I grew up in rural areas where people grew their own food, and that just was business as usual. But it doesn't mean that I'm not willing to do it again. It's good stuff. But when you go into work and you start talking about, you know, hey, I can't wait to harvest my tomatoes I just put in the ground or something like that, you would be just blown away how many people want to learn how to garden, want to grow their own food, even if it's just a little bit, even if they just want a couple of cucumbers to make 1 quart of pickles. It's something about it. It's just good for you. Uh-oh. It's just going down in Norfolk. But it's good for you. And there's so much information. I couldn't possibly cover it. But please, if you do anything from watching this video, look into Ron Finley. Look into, you know, backyard gardens. Look into urban gardens or container gardens or permaculture. Paul Wheaton. I mean, I could name off hundreds of places and sites and things. But just dig into it, you know. And if you guys have a serious sense of humor, or you're just straightforward, I mentioned Ron Finley and Paul Wheaton a lot. They're both very similar men in the sense that they both know what they know how they know it, they want to help you best they can, but you better bring yourself to the table, because they're not going to do it for you. You know, they don't want to sit down and talk, especially Ron Finley. He doesn't want you to sit down and talk about it. He's a very humble guy, you know, from what I've seen. Would love to meet the man in person, but you know, he says some very profound shit. If kids grow kale, kids will eat kale. Well, you're right. But that's not just kids. Adults. I'll eat more vegetables now than I wouldn't as a kid because I grew them myself. Why not? Well, why not get into gardening? Why not doing it? You know, you don't have to be like the organic gardener or the free range, you know, chickens or any of that. So you don't have to start off like buying 100 acres and building this great big huge thing. You can start by putting a planter out on your balcony and growing the strawberry plant. Or you can start, you know, having, you know, just anything. I mean, grow a tomato plant on your balcony, grow a tomato plant on your sidewalk. You can even do windowsill gardens where you can grow vegetables in your windowsills using a mixture of sunlight, north facing, you know, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you know, south facing windows, or there's just so much stuff. So much stuff you can do. Just get out and try it. Just get out and do it. That's it. I mean, It don't get any easier than that. It starts by going and doing it. Well, you can talk about it. We can talk about it. We can discuss it, analyze it, filter it, whatever. But until you get up, get moving, and do this stuff, you're not going to get it done. I tell you right now, my garden don't plan itself. You just got to get up and do it. And I'm not saying you've got to have no huge thing, or you ain't got to be something small. If you want to do something big, that's you. But there's nothing better than seeing, you know, a kid go out and pick blackberries, come back with a bucket full of blackberries, and they stain purple from their eyeballs to their toes. And that happened so many times when I was a kid. Thanks, guys. You know, plant a small tree. You know, go pick the fruit off of it. Put a tree in your yard if you can. If you got a derelict yard, look into guerrilla gardening. You know, got a run down lot in your neighborhood. Ain't nobody doing nothing with it. Not telling you to break the law, but you know, if it's abandoned, it's abandoned. And you get into cities where abandoned lots are a pretty common thing. So I mean, what are you gonna do? You gonna sit there and let that lot be abandoned for years on end, or accidentally plant some stuff in it and get you something? Well, if you got leftovers or spare, or something that you can't eat, or you end up with more than you can preserve, share it with your neighbors, share it with your friends, build community that way. Or you know, go out and plant your garden, and when one of your neighbors asks about it, say, hey, you should try it. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, there's two things that happen when you grow a garden. One is you cultivate a better option for yourself, and two is if you try, you can cultivate a better community. You know, it's just baby steps. You ain't gonna, like I said, Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can always try.